Welcome, everyone, to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator here in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. SIMS is what we call the Schoenberg Institute, and we do a lot of different kinds of projects around manuscripts. We also have a collection, and once a week on Thursdays at noon Eastern Time, I take a book off the shelf and just do a little show and tell. So if this is your first time, I know I already said this, but you're very welcome. I'm glad you're here. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. Usually my colleague Amy Hutchins is here, and she would manage the chat, but she isn't, so I will do my best to keep my eyes on the chat. You can ask questions. If you have knowledge about this manuscript or the text that I don't have, please share it. It's always great when people do that. So let's go ahead and get started. So the shelf mark for this book is LJS 462. It is a didactic poem, which means usually didactic poems, I think, are what we refer to sort of moral poems. This one is about math. And when I looked into the actual poem itself, there isn't, as far as I can tell, a full translation or even an edition, like a scholarly edition of this text, but it's very well known. It exists in at least 161 manuscripts, and that is according to this article here, which I'll be referring to, and which I also included in the links that I shared, which I will share again because I hear some more people coming in. So there we go. So the article is there. So 161 manuscripts from pretty early, I think. So it was written by the author in the 12th century. And then as these things happen, it was copied. Our copy that we're going to be looking at, I'll go ahead and give you a glimpse so you can see. Here, that's not that. Come on, where did we go? Here we go. So this one was copied in Spain in the first half of the 14th century, so between 1300 and 1350. And let's see, so copied in Spain, it's written in Latin, and as I said, it's a didactic poem, so it is about arithmetic, or not really arithmetic, but math, and I'll say a little bit more about where it came from and that kind of thing. So let me make sure that we'll zoom in a little bit. I know there are folks who like to see the script, so you can get a little better look at the script here. The script is Iberian Gothic script. And there is an English hand later in the book, so we'll take a look at that later. So Iberian Gothic. So this would be a Gothic script that is specific to the Iberian Peninsula, to Spain. So that's why we're saying it's from Spain, because it has this distinctive script that you really only see in Spain. Or, I guess, written by scribes who were trained in Spain. So it's possible it was written somewhere else by a scribe who was from Spain. Brian's asking about the lines in the first line. So this is poetry, right? So this is, unlike most of the texts that we look at that are sort of narrative that go from line to line, it's poetry. So each line is a line of the verse. And so the lines at the front, it's just sort of a decorative way to indicate that it's the start of this verse line, right? But you'll see sort of other things too. You'll see that at the very start, there's a larger initial to start out the whole text. We might see more of those later. I can't actually remember. And then there are actually sort of paragraph markings. There's a alternating blue and red paragraph markings here. And I am not sure, I assume that this is some kind of, it's indicating some sort of beginning of another kind of little section, even though we're still in this part of the poem. I have the starting lines here. Let me find the starting lines so we can see come on, where'd it go? poem. I know I have it. I guess I don't have it. But essentially the first lines are, it's saying, here we're starting out the algorithmus. So algorithmus is the second word here. And then here are the numbers, 0, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The so-called Arabic, right, we call them Arabic numerals. I believe in the context, it's referred to as Indian, right? There's a little not really clear about where exactly they're coming from. But this is new to Europe, right, at the time that this poem is coming in. So what this poem is doing is sort of explaining how to do this new math, this new kind of math, using these new kind of numbers. But where does this idea come from of these numbers and the math? Well, it comes from a person called I'm sorry, I'm going to mess this up, I'm sure. Al-Khwarizmi. He was a Persian scholar born in Khwarazm, which is modern Uzbekistan, at the end of the 8th century CE. So he was the person who actually wrote a treatise about how to do math using these numerals. And which has been lost as far as I can tell, that the actual original text that he would have written in Arabic has been lost. But it was not translated. So this is not a translation of his work. It's sort of a reimagining of the kinds of text or the kinds of teaching that he was coming up with himself in terms of like the math. And so it was translated not in necessarily the language sense, but the idea was translated into Europe. And Alexander de Via was the name of the person in the 12th century who wrote this poem. The name of the poem, by the way, which is in the article, is the Carmen de Algorismo. And the word algorismo, or algorithmus, or this in Latin, is actually a Latinization of al-Khwarizmi. So the word for this kind of mathematical thinking actually comes from this historical person who came up with it here. Laura's pointing out it's the start of base 10 numeration. So there was no 0 in Roman numerals. So the fact that the 0 is here and it's included in the thinking of this text is really important for the history of mathematics and calculation. And it's what enabled people in Europe to finally start doing sort of higher level math, because there's only so much math you can do if you're using Roman numerals there. So, all right. So the poem, actually one more thing, because I have this other manuscript, and then I promise we'll look more at this one, but I think it's worth getting all of this background. So the concept of the algorithmus is not only known in Europe because of this poem, although, as I said, this is a very popular poem, at least 161 manuscripts. And when I say 161 manuscripts, I mean these are manuscripts that survive to today. And that still exists. So there were, who knows how many manuscripts that were actually written that don't survive, right? Only a small number of medieval manuscripts actually survive. There were other authors aside from Alexander de Via who were writing their own sort of versions of this teaching, and one of them was Johannes de Sacrobosco. And we have talked about him before. In fact, I'm going to put this aside and show you another manuscript very quickly. This is LJS 26. And this has two texts by Johannes de Sacrobosco. He's probably, I think of him as someone who, he wrote Tractatus de Sphera, which is a book about the stars and astronomy, basically. But he also wrote this text called Algorithmus, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see his own version of algorithmus. This is not poetry, right? This is a longer text, and it's a narrative text. And this has, I'll just cut through a little bit. This also has, boop, boop, boop. We have some numbers here. 9, 8, 7. I think that's actually 0, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this also has 0, but in a sort of odd place. And I want to say that this, does he have, I thought maybe he had actual math, but there's sort of some numbers in the, these are margins, this might be added later. But this is just another example of another author at the similar time. When was, I want to say he was also writing in the 12th century. Right, he was active around 1230, so a little bit later. And in fact, there is, according to the author of the article that I keep referring to, Sacrobosco quotes Alexandre de Viadet's poem. So he had access to the poem and was using it as a source for his own work, which I think is really really interesting. Brian's asking about ruling. I don't see any, but there are prick marks. So it has been ruled. It's just very light. So there we go. All right. So this is just a very quick look at this other early manuscript of the same text. So now we're going back to the poem, and I know we haven't seen much, so let's get into it. The poem is divided into 7 sections, and the reason it's divided into 7 sections is because the algorithmus, that is this text of mathematics that was come up with by the fellow from modern Uzbekistan, came up with 7 operations. And the first I'll show you sort of, all right, here we are. So first we have this introduction, which we've got this nice initial, and then we have the first species, I guess it's pronounced, which is basically the first bunch. So the first one is addition. So this is going to be addition, this will be subtraction. And the way that it's organized is there are 7 operations in 2 groups. And the groups are based on their performing direction. That is, do you do the math from left to right or from right to left? So it starts with the ones that go from right to left. So think about if you're adding numbers, you're going to have one set of numbers, 12 and 24. First, you're going to add the 2 and the 4 that are on the right, and that makes 6. And then you're going to, if you have to carry numbers, then you carry them up, and then you come down. So that's what he's describing here. But you're starting on the right and moving left. We have addition. Then we have subtraction. Things that I'm noticing, we have the large initials are alternating red and blue. So our first one was red, this is blue, this is red. If you've been here before, you know that I'm always stuck on this alternation of red and blue, which is super common. You see it in manuscripts in all kinds of genres, including didactic poetry about math from Spain, and also manuscripts from England and from France. It's just something that everybody seems to do if you have access to both of those colors. So there's 2, and here's 3, and this is going to be doubling, which is not multiplication. I'm not entirely sure actually what doubling is, but obviously it's like multiplying. I would say multiplying by 2, but clearly there's like something else that's going on. I also think it's fun that they have these little fillers, line fillers here. However, there's an interesting thing that happens here. I'm not sure why, because the first 3 we have it has its own little line, but then here, this is the 4th one. But it just gets a note in the margin. It doesn't get its own line. I don't know if the scribe was concerned about space or what exactly was happening there, why this change, but clearly there's a little change. So the first group was the 3, addition, subtraction, doubling. And the next one is the 4, multiplication, division, 3, multiplication, division, and root extraction. Oh, those are the 6, and then there's another section about progressions, which is found in some manuscripts, and I don't know if it's in this manuscript, so we're going to take a look. So now we're on to, should be multiplication. So this is going to be the section on multiplication. I'm going to take a quick zoom in to look at the ruling, which is visible here. So when we talk about ruling, what that is the lines that the scribes write on. That's how they are able to write straight lines. And it can be done in a few different ways, and it's done in different ways in Western manuscripts versus non-Western manuscripts. But in Europe, it's very common to see out in the margin these little dots, which are actually holes. They're called prick marks. And then when it's a full sheet, someone will take like a straight edge and draw lines and sort of frame where the text is going to be written. And you can see here there are lines, there's lines here, and is there one over here? No, but you can see it better on this page. Lines coming down here and here, so those are the indications of where the text should be, and then the ruling lines here are where the scribe should be writing. And you can see in this case he's actually slightly above the line, which is kind of neat. But that's how they get to these straight lines. Because it's poetry, though, the lines might be a little bit longer, like the text might overshoot a little bit or under, like here, just depending. So often when you're looking at a manuscript that is not poetry, where you just can have text and text and text, some scribes are actually very, very careful to stay within that line. And you might have a word break in the middle to go to the next line, and that is not happening. That isn't happening here, although there are a lot of, you can see, these are abbreviations to keep the word short. So what these are is indications that the scribe is leaving letters out, and then is able to shorten the word, just putting a little indication of what is missing. And that can help, particularly, although there are abbreviations all over, but particularly at the end of the word. Matilda is saying having color in the first letter of each line isn't common. So earlier we were talking about having this here. It's not, but it's because it's poetry in this case. For whatever reason, the scribe decided. I do think you see the same thing, though, sometimes in narrative texts at the first word or the first letter of a sentence, the first letter of the first word of a sentence. So it's sort of serving the same purpose here. It's just showing that here's the start. We're starting something where you see this little decoration. Okay, so I will zoom back out, and we are... Where did I say we were? We're in multiplication, I think. No. Yes, multiplication, and then next will be division. So here's 5. The fifth species is division, and then 6 is going to be double. I keep looking at the wrong one. Root extraction. And so that is number 6. So we're on page 4, right? This is a short little poem. And then, you know what? I said that the scribe didn't break, but here we have an example of the scribe running out of room, and has come down to the line here. At first I thought maybe that was catchword, but it's not a catchword because we are in the middle of a choir. We're only on page 3. A catchword, if you don't know, is something that the scribe will put at the end of a choir, which is a sort of physical section of the book, like a little booklet. That will be the first word of the next line, and it helps the person who's doing the binding to know that the choirs, that the physical sections are being bound in the right order. So that is not what is happening here because we're in the middle of a choir. He just ran out of space, and so he stuck it there. Also, this word, this is going quite far into the margin there. All right, so we have 6, which is root extraction, and then we do have 7. So 7 is over here. So I am assuming that this 7 is this section that's about progressions, which I don't know math, so I don't actually know what progressions are, but it is something to do with math. Although, I'm really curious now because this article says there are 6 verses. 6 verses? Does that mean 6 lines? Because this is way longer than 6 lines, right? This is a very long section there. And then there's this, which does not have a, or are we in the second? There's actually a second text in this manuscript. Maybe that's where we are. No, I don't know. I don't actually know what this is because the poem is only supposed to have 6 sections. I wish Amy were here. I'm going to tell her about this. So there's something here. It's more poetry. And then it ends. And we have, this is kind of fun to see. This is an explicit, which is the official ending. So we're saying this is the end of the algoritmus. Deo gratias. Thank the Lord. We're at the end of the algoritmus. So there's something interesting happening here because it feels like this is actually more than the official poem, and I'd be really interested to that. Let's see. Zukik, if there were square roots, could one of the mystery operations be to the power of 2? Could be. Yeah, I don't know. And as I say, like this, as far as I can tell, this actually hasn't been translated. I think the person who wrote the article that I keep referring to has not very nice things to say about the poem itself. Like it's not very good poetry. And like, why poetry? Why would you write this in poetry? It seems that it was meant to be sort of a very, very basic introduction, and that the genre of the didactic poem is one of, it kind of makes it easier to remember, and a little bit, hopefully then easier to learn. Although, again, from what I can tell, because I haven't read it, it's actually not very clear at all. Like he doesn't use very clear language and, that kind of thing. And in fact, the Sacro Bosco text, so the manuscript I showed you before, is more clear in terms of language. Maybe, I know that the author, Alexander de Villadei, he also wrote a didactic poem about grammar that was actually incredibly popular also and was copied a lot. And it might be that he just liked didactic poetry. And so he saw this as a challenge, and that's why he wrote it. Let's see, Cassandra is pointing out that math teachers still use song to help students remember things. So poetry as a memory tool wouldn't be far-fetched. It wouldn't. I still remember, what is it called? My Very Educated, that's not really a poem, but My Very Educated Mother Just Served Us 9 Pizzas, which is the planets. That's, although I guess Pluto isn't a planet anymore, or maybe it is. But anyway, that's one that sticks with me from a long time. Okay, then there's actually a second text here, which I didn't advertise, but we can take a quick look at it because we have a few minutes. And I didn't look at it at all. So what is this? Compotus Manualis is the name of the text. The catalog says an anonymous treatise in verse on the calendar, focusing on establishing feast and fast days, including discussion of solar and lunar movement. Right. So the calculation of the date of Easter is a huge deal throughout the Middle Ages. In fact, it was, there are probably a lot more than this, but this is the one I'm familiar with. In England, in the, 7th century, there were two churches. There was the sort of Irish church, the church that came over from Ireland, which used one method for calculating the date of Easter. And then there was the Roman church, which had come right at the end of the 6th century. Augustine of Canterbury was sent from Rome, and they had a different way of calculating the date of Easter. And one of the kings, his wife was already Irish. She was Irish, a member of the Irish church, and so she celebrated Lent and then Easter according to that calculation. But he was converted by Augustine, and so he was celebrating Lent and Easter according to this other calculation. You might think, well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is you had two people in the same household, and one of them would be celebrating Easter while the other one was still in Lent, which was a big deal for them. And in fact, they had a meeting in I'm totally blanking. It was I can't remember where it was, in northern England, and they had this big meeting, and it was decided that all of England would follow the Roman Church and the Roman way of calculating. So this text is a text in poetry, because we love our didactic poetry, about how you calculate Easter and other important feast days. So, come on. My light's going off, and I'm jumping up and down, and it still is going, come on! All right, hold on. Sorry, I hate doing this. Why is it, there we go. I'm so sorry. All right, we have some marginalia here. Thank you, Louise, for the thumbs up. I think this might be the English note. So we do have somebody finally coming in and writing a little note. Someone pointed out earlier that there is not much marginalia. There's not any marginalia in the earlier part, which is kind of interesting, but here we have some. What this means, Marie says it wouldn't be coffee with a codex without Dot jumping up and down for the lights. I hate that that's true. Matilda, quack after dark. I do love it. Thank you. I'm sorry. So it's a little bit, it looks pretty much the same. It's the same scribe. This text starts in the middle of a choir on the opposite side of a leaf from where the other text ends. This was clearly planned. Like, for some reason, the scribe wanted to put, or maybe someone paid the scribe to do this, wanted to put these two texts together. The fact that they're both poems is really interesting. It was some kind of program. So we're just about done. I'll just page through a little bit, because this is the end, and I think, is there anything else? Oh, yeah. If there is a blank leaf in a manuscript, somebody eventually will come along and fill it in. This might be the same. This looks similar to the one that the little line that was at the bottom that I pointed out earlier. I think that might be the same hand. So somebody was very interested. John Black coming through. Synod of Whitby, 664. The resolution of the dating of Easter. Yes, Whitby. Thank you. I knew that. I studied that, and that was what I studied in school, literally in graduate school, so I should have been able to remember that. So thank you very much. All right, and that is it. This is the manuscript. Thank you all so much. We looked at every page, just about. And when I started, I wasn't sure how this would go, but I think that was really fun. I learned a lot about didactic poetry and about algorithms. Thank you all so much for being here. And I will be back next week, and I hope to see you there.